Episode 10. Piggy to the Rescue. The next day, the child reminded her about Bucky, so the mother found instructions for a simple tensegrity structure to make, using 3 straws and some rubber bands. It took the both of them using all 4 hands to build it. It was small and simple, but clearly demonstrated the idea, and the child proudly showed it to father at the dinner table, pleased that even he had never seen such a device. The father was quite impressed and said so. "What else have you been discovering in this adventure story?" he asked. "Perhaps I should listen in on it too." "Oh, father, we would have to begin at the beginning again, and that would be with Golgothicus. Whatever has happened to him, I wonder?" That night, the child wanted to know right away about Arky's plan to rescue Calculus Pygatus. "But if they find Calculus Pygatus, do they make it back to Trajan?" "I don't know," replied the mother, "but don't worry. Trajan is the strongest of all the great archers. While Arky and his friends are in their own futures, the world keeps moving. In fact, there has been a discovery that will change the war between the archers. But let's find out what happened in those icy tunnels first." At the bottom of the icy pit they had just dug, Bucky had to contort himself to fit in the tunnels. The 3 gathered behind a corner at the entrance of the Snow Stooge's lair. Up ahead, the glow of Calculus Pygatus was brighter, a sign they were almost upon him. Suddenly, they heard growls and roars, and they froze, fearful of what might be happening. "Wait here," Arky whispered to the others, and crept forward as silently as he could on the crunching ice. He peeked around the bend in the tunnel and saw 3 white, furry, bear-like creatures wearing colorful caps and capes, and they were fighting over Piggy. In the middle of the frozen room were chairs and a table all carved out of ice. Around it stood the huge Snow Stooges, each had a paw on the metal bars of Calculus Pygatus. To Arky they seemed to be some sort of polar bears crossed with tigers, or perhaps the other way round. As they tussled, they knocked over the ice chairs, and to Arky's dismay he saw that they were pulling and unfolding their transportation device into a straight line. Behind them was a large tub of icy water, with some sort of huge mechanisti device for dipping things into it. Clamps with icicles hanging from them showed that the dipper could hold on to whatever it was they wanted to coat with ice. It appeared that the creatures were trying to force Calculus Pygatus into one of the clamps. "Oh, Arky, look!" It was Ify who had appeared at his side. She motioned to the walls next to them, and Arky could now see where the glow in the room was coming from. Row upon row of straightened Calculi Pygati frozen into the ice. As if behind a wall of glass they saw hundreds of devices like their own, each with many fine markings on their bars, glowing in a pulsing rhythm. Ify and Arky were amazed at the sight, but angry clicks brought their attention back to their Calculus Pygatus struggling with the Snow Stooges. It did not like this treatment at all, but the strength of the huge furry creatures was too much for it. They could have bent it all crookedy-crookedy if they did not spend so much time punching and clawing at each other. Arky knew he had to act fast, but before he could move, the biggest creature of them all stopped and turned towards them with a roar. "Stand back, Ify," Arky said. "I'll deal with this guy. You figure a way to rescue these other Pygati, while Beta arrives silently and unnoticed." Just then, Beta burst through the ceiling over the tub of water and fell straight into it with a splash. Icy water soaked the furry creatures who howled in rage. Beta bobbed up and down a few times, getting a thicker and thicker coat of ice each time. He said with his mower blades chattering. Suddenly, Arky felt a strong arm grab him from behind. "Hang on, young sir," said Bucky, who had scooped up Arky as if he were a snowball and proceeded to hurl him like a sideways catapult down the icy tunnel. Arky went flying past the 3 fighting figures and skidded off the icy round wall behind them, shooting back into their midst like a bowling ball. Shouting aloud, "Woohoo! This should be a distraction!" he crashed through the dipping machine and collided into the Stooges and the ice chairs behind them with a terrific whack. They dropped their grip on Calculus, who spun on the ice, clicking furiously. Arky and the Snow Stooges slid to a stop in a tangle heap, and he saw that the water tub had rolled over and Beta lay in an icy pile to one side. Snarling, the Snow Stooges jumped up and onto Arky, paws swinging. "Get off of me, you stupid stooges!" Arky shouted and pushed them away with a hard shove of his abutments, ducking to avoid an ice chair that had been thrown at him. The largest of the Snow Stooges roared, but Arky stuck out a plinth and he went down in a heap of his own. He lay there snoring like a baby Snow Stooge, but the other creatures kept up the fight. "Woohoo! Grab Beta and Calculus Pigatus and get back to the surface!" Arky hollered to his companions. "I'll follow as soon as I'm done here." He struggled to stand, but every time he tried, he slipped back down onto the hard ice, sometimes with a roaring Snow Stooge falling on top of him. "Whoa!" he shouted as one of the creatures hurled him across the room. He slid to a stop upside down, helpless against the charging beasts. All at once he felt himself being pushed from behind straight into the huge white creatures. "Don't worry, Arky," Ify yelled. "We're all right behind you." And in fact his companions were right behind him, pushing him across the ice like an upside-down battering ram, straight into the Snow Stooges. "Lower your pedestals, Arky," Ify called. Arky put the pillars of his legs low to the ice so that they could scoop their enemies off their feet. Sure enough, with a mighty crash, they all collided, scattering the giant creatures who retreated down a side tunnel. "Thanks, team," Arky said as he stood up. "It was a good thing you stayed to help. But let's get out of here before those stooges come back. I don't think we can stay long enough to chip out all these frozen piegati." The adventurers didn't need any more coaxing. Bucky retrieved the block of ice that encased Beta, and Ify picked up Calculus Pigatus with her long antenna. Together they ran back to the hole they'd entered by. One by one, the big tensegrity tower tossed them safely back up to the snow-swept surface. When he climbed out at last, Arky and Ify pushed a pile of snow back into the hole, filling in the tunnels and keeping the Snow Stooges from climbing up after them. Ify cradled Calculus Pigatus, who was shivering as his clicks became calmer. Arky and Bucky examined the frozen Beta. "He is a mechanisti. His gears and blades need to move or they will be frozen for good," warned Bucky. "We have no fire to thaw his lubricants, but if we can get his wheels to spin, his insides will follow suit." "Beta," called Arky to his friend, "can you spin your wheels at all? You have to turn your blades, or you'll be stuck like this." Beta did not move in response. Arky feared for the worst. "We need to turn his wheels for him," said Ify. "If we can wrap something around them and pull it, it might just work." "But I'm not even made of struts anymore," she lamented. Arky was spinning his own mind trying to find an answer when a voice next to him offered a solution. "You may use one of my cables," said Bucky. "They are quite strong, and with you pulling it might just break the ice that binds him. You will have to be swift." "But Bucky, if you do that, you yourself will come apart," cried Ify. "Didn't you say that all your wires and struts were absolutely necessary to hold yourself together? You don't have any to spare." "Yes, pretty young Ify. I will be reduced to a superfluity if even one of my cables or struts is removed. I may not see you again, but I will be careful not to move, and when you are done, if you can replace it where you have taken it from, I might be able to regain my sense of structure." He laid down in the snowpack next to them. "Here," he said. "Take this one. Your friend is freezing solid. Act fast." Ify set Calculus down and gently lifted the thin wire from Bucky's side. The moment it left him, he went slack and his struts collapsed with a sigh. "Oh, Bucky," she cried. "Arky, help me! We have to be quick!" Together they knocked and scraped at the ice around Beta's wheels until they could wrap one of them with the precious cable from Bucky. Then Arky took it with his pedestal and backed away from their frozen friend. While Ify braced herself against Beta, Arky swung his leg in a massive kick, pulling the wire taut and causing the block wheel to spin. With a series of violent shudders and a clack-a-clank, Beta's blades began to turn, and slowly but surely his whole frame vibrated itself free of the ice. "Thanks, guys," Beta stammered, shivering to warm himself up. "Where's Bucky?" he asked. Arky and Ify were relieved to see their friend back amongst them and turned immediately to the heap of wires and struts that once were Bucky. "How do we put the wire back?" asked Ify. "He's all shifted somehow." Arky studied the form in the snow. "All of his struts need a corresponding cable. All we have to do is find which ones are missing a wire," he reassured her. Within a few moments they had located the only struts that seemed to be without a cable and threaded the wire through them. Now we have to pull him into tension so that the wire can do its job, Arky said to Ify. You take that end of Bucky, and I'll take this one. Together, he and Ify stretched and pulled at the big tower. Even Beta was feeling well enough to help, but it was no use. Bucky was too big for them to pull tight enough. Arky and Ify collapsed, frustrated in the snow, exhausted. I wish Piggy could go back through that squirrel pool of his and get us some crepes as reinforcements, Beta said. Those big baboons are strong ones, and we need a bigger set of pullers. I'm just a push lawnmower. Suddenly they noticed that Calculus Piegatus was clicking madly. Beta retrieved it, bringing it over to the inert form of Bucky. It began making circular forms right in front of them, and suddenly he realized what it meant. Piggy wants to help, Beta called to the others. Of course, said Arky. Calculus Piegatus can make a whirlpool that can suck anything through time and space. That should be enough to stretch Bucky back to life. Hang on to this end with me. Together, the three friends anchored the top of the tall tower while Calculus Piegatus clicked into a frenzy. Soon a swirling hole in the chronoflux opened up at Bucky's feet, pulling a rush of wind and ice like a snowy tornado into its maw. The long tensegrity frame was picked up by the storm, the base end whipping itself further and further into the abyss of time and space, while the young adventurers strained against the pull at its top. Arky felt the ice cracking beneath them from the tremendous force they were resisting, and hoped their plan would work fast. Just when he thought they would all be sucked into the time and space tempest, there came a mighty twang, and Bucky the tensegrity structure snapped back to life. Almost immediately, the time tornado ended, and Calculus Piegatus dropped back onto the snow with a fizz of steaming ice. The tall tower twisted and stretched, accompanied by many musical sounds from his wires and struts. "Thank you," he called down to them. "This feels good, even better than before, but I don't think I would recommend it to any of my brethren, even if they do complain of aches in the cold." "Thanks, Bucky," said Arky. "You took a brave risk to help Beta here, and you sure were handy in that fight. We're off on an adventure to save the army of Roman archers. Would you like to come and help us?" "Yes," said Ify. "Come with us. You don't have to be a lonely antenati out here in the wild all by yourself." "And thanks from me too, Bucky," said Beta to the tall tower. "I was afraid myself that I would be looking out of the wrong side of an icicle for the rest of time." The large strut and wire tower shook from side to side as if to say no thank you. "It would be an honor to travel alongside you, Beta and Arky and pretty Miss Ify." And again Ify blushed. "However, my purpose is to be here in the cold wilds. No other structures can be as strong and tall as we are, and light enough not to fall through the ice. It is beautiful to realize you are the only one of a kind doing your best at your job, and I am happy to fulfill my purpose." He turned to Ify. "You have many possibilities in front of you, young Ify. Don't worry about what the future will bring, and don't fret over me. I am not lonely. Nature is my companion. It is so beautiful in the wilds. The moon and stars are my friends too." Ify wanted to say something, but words failed her. She nodded numbly and hugged the big tower. Bucky gave her a hug back and went over to Arky. "I don't think this will be goodbye forever," he said. "You have discovered what it is the snow stooges are collecting and hiding, and now that your Piegatus has found me once, it can find me again, I'm sure. It wants to free its brethren, but you will need a bigger team to manage that. We were lucky enough to get out alive this time. Save the Roman archers and come back. I will be waiting to hear a woohoo and will know it is you." The darkness was growing around them, and Arky felt it was time to move on. "Well, thank you again, Bucky. Come on, guys. We have to go find Colosseo Pompey and his troops so that they can get Uncle Trajan's message. Calculus Piegatus, are you ready to help us now?" The folding metal bars clicked in what seemed to be an affirmative, and began unfolding into first a square and then a star shape. "Be ready when it gets into a circle," Arky warned. "I'm sure it'll happen fast then." "I've got Ify with me," Beta the lawnmower yelled. "We can crowd together to all fit inside Piggy's circle." Lights were beginning to sparkle around them as Calculus Piegatus unfolded into his time and space traveling form. "Gosh," said Beta out loud, "I just remembered that when we left we were supposed to bring something unusual for show and tell at school the next day. I wish we could go to school with something from here for that. Suppose we could get one of those ice chairs with us." He never got a chance to finish his question because of the bright flash. The tunnel through dimensions opened, and they vanished from the icy plains of Bucky the Tensegrity Tower and the Snow Stooges. How does Bucky tell his strings and sticks to move, Mummy? Cables and struts, the mother replied. Like you make your legs and arms move, I suppose, by thinking it so, and they move. But is that all he is? Are muscles and bones all you are? Hardly. Each inanimati, like you and I, has a spirit and a personality that is the heart of who they are. That is why Beta is still Beta, even if he has grown into a lawnmower. The child had other questions as well. Can we find out how Trajan's war with the Gothics is going? Yes, answered the mother. We will need to visit the combatants to understand what adventure the friends will have next, but tomorrow night. And she kissed her child, turned out the light, and closed the door.